Alright, back straight into it. This is a pretty famous, notorious scene from the game. I have a few thoughts I want to open with, but I'll actually let this situation kind of play out at first. It's a very famous, iconic one. Subtitles are on, so it doesn't matter if I speak. Covenant aren't here, maybe nobody's home. Now I need to pay attention because there they are, people are home. Sorry to that guy, but I had to let the scene play out. Contact, lots of contact. This is kind of one of many moments in the game that's kind of playing off of the, famous aliens moment of the Marines are all feeling good about themselves and then, all the aliens show up. Lots of contact, as that one guy said. Just a very charming scene, in my opinion. We have lots of personality on display from these guys, and it's what is usually a very boring thing that video games do, in my opinion. Lock you in a room and have guys flood out at you, but the fact we're in here with other guys and they have that funny reaction and it's a radically new looking room relative to the rest of the game, this is more of a setup and payoff for a story moment than it is a, arena encounter in a first-person shooter or whatever it is people would call this, when basically something like Doom Eternal would do a similar thing. Just lock you in a room with a bunch of goblins and you have to shoot them because, that's what these games are about, isn't it? But yeah, doesn't mean like the fact I'm always talking about things that aren't the game, don't get me wrong on that. This is an extremely fun game to just play. All the stuff you're doing at any given moment is really fun. But yeah, that's not why it's an iconic game. I don't think that's why it's a game which has lasted. It's very fun to shoot things in Halo, but everyone knows that, I think, and you can watch any idiot playing this game and you can see the same things you see when I play, which is just that it's a very cool physical game in which you can just bounce around off the walls and punch and blow things up and everything flies around in ways which I've talked about a bit. Extremely fun, very entertaining, and here's the gang, and we've hit a wall. I gotta go around. Trying to open up my throat a bit. I think I was a bit tight yesterday, but the sound seems to have been alright. One moment, let me just check I'm recording. Yep, we're all good. Sorry if I get paranoid on that. Now, what I wanted to go into, I might actually take a moment here, even in this room, just comments from last time. Again, they don't tend to be made on the video. I mostly do this at the moment for people I already know in other places, and it just gets talked about there. The first comment on my mind I wanted to just bring up because I found it very funny was someone said that the, uglified version of the area where we came up here looked like an area from a Korean MMO. I thought that was an extremely funny comment. And otherwise, yes, I could just run you through the comparison again. Look, they obliterated the lighting. It's like this dark, moody, cool, not really lit, neglected back area of the ship to, oh god, why does it look like this? It looks cluttered, nonsensical, extremely busy, hideous. And why does everything in this giant, complex spaceship look so detailed inside? Like, why are we inside a computer? This is insanity. Again, think Adolf Loos. Why is there ornamentation everywhere? This looks much better, like we have what might be decoration or might be wiring running up and down the walls. The metals seem to still be consistently purple, but it doesn't look absurd. I can imagine intelligent, serious people designing this room. These aliens aren't... It's kind of a theme that will recur in the game in various ways, that the aliens are actually kind of primitive and have access to things which are beyond their means, so they do kind of get frivolous with their construction and their taste and so on. They do have a bit of that strange, primitive visual silliness in how they instinctively construct things. But if they were really so stupid that they liked the look of this, I don't even think they would be able to build a spaceship out of someone else's technology, is where I'm going with that. And yes, just otherwise, everything looks kind of silly and ugly if we flip between the different looks. As always, what's new? And yeah, so what else was I saying? Yes, there was just much discussion. Again, just friends of mine just weigh in, and even if no one on YouTube, the algorithm never picks this up, it's still worth it. I just like being able to prompt myself with things other people say and keep talking and thinking. It's mental exercise, it gets me doing something. Feels very worth it. Anyway, what else was said? Just lots of comparison insensibilities, and something I meant to do has finally come up. Investigation into who did this. I mean, and yeah, no surprise, on one end it was 343, the horrible Bungie successor studio run by Frank O'Connor. I might get into that man and why he is basically not very good for why he was not good for Halo later. The other thing is, it was a Russian company who did the other half of the work. I forget what they're called, but they're this Russian company that did a few okay first-person shooters, the kinds where, even though I looked them up earlier today, I already can't remember their titles. They were very kind of middling kind of guys. So that's kind of the esteem Bungie held for this thing, which makes them so much money. You know, they're just thinking, make Halo 4, Call of Duty this thing, get us more money. They don't really care. They outsource it to Russia. And 343 is run by imbeciles, so that's also not good. It's just, again, it's it's actually a rather funny thematic parallel with what's going on within Halo. I talk about that in the first level videos, which I'll probably record again. I won't delete the old ones, but I'll put them aside as kind of the unofficial extra version of that level. Pardon me one moment. Yes, the thematic parallel which can be made is that... One moment. The thematic parallel which can be made is that Halo, at its core, is a story about the legacy of civilization, the mantle of civilization, I think it's called within the lore or whatever, which is basically picked up by the wrong people, and that causes the whole conflict these games are about and everything else. What happened is, there was an old civilization that's gone, and these imbeciles were fighting, found all of their stuff, and they aren't that sharp, they aren't too cut out for it, but they've managed to build a civilization out of the ruins of things they didn't build, and humanity is, you know, they didn't find any old stuff, it's all hand-built from mankind's own ingenuity, and the big war broke out upon contact because the aliens are... You know, despite the better tech, you know, it's not theirs. They're kind of superstitious and backwards and silly. They are not as civilizationally gifted as humanity in this universe. And so there's basically a war which is their fault because they're dumb and they're afraid of humanity. And yes, there are more and more visual cues over the course of the game which are kind of obliterated in this mode, that humanity is better qualified to pick up the mantle of civilization which the aliens currently have. They just grab. Yeah, it's kind of the ongoing point of Halo, which is explored but not fully realized in the sequels because Bungie frankly kind of lost control of their own work. Where the story was going is... This is a war for control of, like, who gets to be master of civilization in the universe between the, you know, circumstantially privileged but not cut out for it aliens and humanity who are kind of, you know, disinherited natural masters. It's very... Again, I talk about things like Adolf Loos because, frankly, Halo is a very racially conscious piece of science fiction to a degree which is kind of shocking. The more you think about it, the more sense it makes. At least if you ask me. Now, to bring it back to where we were, of course, the mantle of Halo was basically handed over to people who are about as qualified for it as these little runty, silly alien monkey men are for the, you know, power to make spaceships and lasers and everything. They just... Again, you know, Bungie were the real ones, and they're gone, and then it all got handed off to these guys. And you just think, when you look at the state of American video games, where did the great masters who built this go? Is there perhaps a faction within there equivalent to humanity in Halo, the kind of disinherited successors to the old masters who could maybe right everything if they would just stop being attacked by the crazy people who took over the thing. That's, I maybe won't get more explicit. If you know your games, and maybe if you know me as well, you can see exactly where I'm going with that and why Halo just fascinates me to absolutely no end. Maybe I'll get more explicit with that later if I want to have some fun, but I've already had fun, and, put it together yourself, it'll be good for you. But yeah, okay, I'm playing the game again, and yeah, so you might remember before I started talking about the silliness of the aliens and what Halo is about and how it's, still looks silly because the wrong people are making it now. Yeah, we left our buddies, the Marines, behind a big door and they trusted us to go let them through. Not that we need them, but we'll be nice, we'll go get them. So we swept around there and now we're in this big room. Cortana's telling us things. If you don't remember, she's the voice in our head. She tells us what's going on. She's our intelligence master. She can justify whatever the plot needs, and more broadly within the lore, of course, there's actually some rather interesting thematic warrior cult stuff where she is very explicitly within the backstory modeled on Diana, and the idea is we are the Spartan soldier and she is Diana. We are war power and capability paired with wisdom, which makes us, the real civilized. We're kind of the fighting arm of civilization, and these guys, they don't have Cortana, they are not favored by Diana, they are unwise. Again, it's a story about civilization. We have the right stuff, they don't, that's why we win. And something that the lore kind of goes into, and if you're just playing the game and paying attention, you'll notice that, the absurd computing power and knowledge and insight of Cortana as she's just saying stuff all game, she is the reason humanity does anything remotely well from the stuff that we see in the games. She is just basically a one artificial woman, she's a one-woman army headquarters, intelligence operation network and everything, and she just does all of those jobs perfectly at once, and thanks to that, humanity is able to really outmaneuver them. And on the other hand, humanity creates the Master Chief, and a big thematic point with him is that he's not just a big dumb fighting arm. There is this big Starship Troopers arc in his backstory where he is kind of given a very rigorous classical education with his manabund of fellow kidnapped orphans to become, not just a very good killer, but a kind of exceptional specimen of humanity. And then you look at what we're fighting, and it's... the lore explanation is the little guys with the breathing packs, they are slave soldiers. These ones with the shields, they are mercenaries. And these tall guys, they're kind of like the samurai overcast of this alien alliance. And being the warrior cast, because this game was made by people with old sensibilities, whether they knew it or not, they are obviously the best of them. And the plot that comes out in the later one, which is very interesting, is basically that there is... some of them start waking up, the aliens, and there's a lot of strife and interesting stuff going on within their culture, and a bit more of the nature of all of the different players as individuals and as kind of collectives, races, if we want to call it that. Their standards and inclinations and beliefs, characters start to really be fleshed out and play off of each other in ways which are very interesting and kind of telling where Bungie's heads were at, and more of what they think of the world is revealed. And gee, I think Halo CE, this one is where you can make most of the really fun, interesting points. It's self-sufficient to see everything which Bungie believe, but gee, it gets so explicit at points in 2 that people who aren't me have realized at least the edge of what's going on, and you can basically see memes about Halo 2 where people kind of play off of the racial element to a certain extent. You can make lots of very funny jokes and parallels there. Again, if I were editing, I might link some in here, but you can find them on your own if you really want to. I'll probably play Halo 2 eventually and talk about it more there, but again, Halo, weirdly racially conscious story, like, this was the early 2000s, who had that on their mind? But then at the same time, this was the early 2000s, you could have that on your mind and no one would really care, nobody's wired to look for this. And, you know, even now in our really wired time, I think it's interesting because it's done in a not in-your-face, crass, moronic way. I think it's... I wouldn't say it's subtle, but it's not done in a way people are cued in to look for, so... You know, it's basically lost on most people, and the extent to which it is there, more obviously people don't care about. They just... Again, it's not the kind of media people are primed to think about. It's old, people don't care about the past. Not even of pop media like video games, and not even only 20 or so years into the past, which I do think is quite sad, but it also protects Halo. And what was the other thought I had? Yes, one person actually, now that I think about it, I shouldn't say now I think about it, I've been saying this for a long time. One person kind of famously did catch on to at least the edge of this in Halo from the start, and he's gone on about it, but because he's paranoid and kind of Chicken Little, the earth is falling, boy who cried wolf, he goes on about this in all video games and thinks he sees it everywhere. But when he said it about Halo, he was probably much more right than he knew, and was just kind of being an attention-whoring hysteric, so he didn't chase it up. But God, if this guy actually tried to seriously investigate this, he probably could have found some very interesting things. And if you don't know yet, I'm talking about Movie Bob Chipman. You might remember, probably like 10 years ago now or something like that, he got into a lot of trouble for tweeting like, wow, look how much like crazy racialist, like supremacist, like weird right-wing stuff is going on in Halo, and everyone just says, haha, wow, look at the crazy fat lunatic, imagine caring about a thing, imagine thinking that anything means anything. But like, no, his observations were crass and simple because of course he hates shooters or, you know, any game with a gun, so he didn't play Halo or really do his homework. But the few base elements he was able to observe and did talk about, I would say, were actually, yes, those kind of are hints to the greater presence of what he actually did suggest was there. And you know, the reason that didn't come out was because he wasn't ultimately serious about talking about this. And so, you know, I regularly consume media which I really dislike. I know I'm going to hate it going in, but basically it lets me study more of humanity, even the parts I don't really enjoy or like. I find that interesting. And I'm not a professional critic. Movie Bob really, I think, if he were more serious about his work, I think it's a real shame we all kind of missed out. Movie Bob should have done a hate play of Halo, like what I'm doing now, or an edited video or something, and basically really scoured this thing for any signs of right-wing sentiment, and that would have been a very, very interesting discussion we all could have had about this. But, of course, gamers are natural dirt eaters on both sides of this thing, so it wouldn't have been a discussion, even if someone raised a valid point or an interesting line of discussion. The answer on both sides would have been, haha, wow, imagine caring, imagine believing anything would mean anything. And someone I know has made a very good point about the whole absurd Gamergate phenomena where it wasn't really like one side was right or had better taste or better things to say. It was really, I'm not being a centrist here, I'm being a supremacist. It was basically two factions of morons arguing about basically meaninglessness for the most part. Like, both sides really seem to mostly convey the impression that they believe video games are very stupid. And Anita Sarkeesian's rather bad arguments which she made should have been used as springboards from which to make good, accurate observations about games, but basically no one really did that. Like, Bayonetta being called a misogynistic work is rather absurd if you have played it, but the answer to that is not to, you know, cry and say no one should try to do communist talks about your games or whatever. The answer is to say, like, no, it's not, because it's actually about this. And, you know, if you actually are a halfway intelligent person and try to make sense of Bayonetta, you'll of course see that it is like a weird kind of Japanese take on a female empowerment story, but even beyond that, I'm not saying like, no, wow, look, we actually loved women all along. Like, even if it was misogynistic, the answer should still be, okay, so what? Do you like it or don't you? And so on. Just, let's have a conversation here, not a witch hunt. But yeah, the Gamergate side basically does neither and says no, nobody should ever talk seriously about anything and clams up, and that's been where it's at ever since. And why I bring that up, if just to bring it back around, I think Movie Bob basically missed his chance to become like the more intelligent Anita Sarkeesian against video games. And it all comes back to people just not taking them seriously enough, not pursuing genuine appreciation of things that they ostensibly love and devote so much time to, which I consider very sad. Like, I really love video games and think they have the potential to be the art of the future, and really they are. They're the art of the present, future, and so on, just most of them are garbage, which doesn't mean anything about the medium itself, and most attempts at appreciating them are garbage, but again, that says nothing about the potential strengths of the medium, just that it's lost on most people. The wrong kinds of people are looking at them. The people who probably could make sense of it are demoralized or told there's nothing to see here, so they don't look. It's just a very upsetting situation, and again, just repeat myself once more to close off the thought. Movie Bob, I think, could have started the conversation which made people take Halo seriously, even if negatively, and he didn't do that. And why I bring up Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian? There was the potential to talk more seriously about video games and all of that. And that was potential which was not taken up because, again, most people don't want to. And even someone pretending to, like Anita, and arguably Bob too, because again, why didn't he go more seriously? Was he just busy with other stuff, or did he kind of not care? He was just being a bit of a hysteric when he brought this up. I don't know. If this ever takes off, maybe I can get Movie Bob to answer me on that subject. I would honestly like to talk to the guy. When he talks about movies, he really does sound frankly smarter than like 99% of people on the internet when they try to talk about movies. Like, he is at least at the level of like higher letterboxed guy who does not have strange thoughts on gender, you know? It's not good. The state of pop art criticism is not good in the 21st century. Anyway, this has probably been a pretty interesting talk. I had more on my mind than I thought, and I might call it here for one video and then just keep going, get some uploading started, and start on the next one. I always surprise myself with how easy it is to talk when I start these. Hope you enjoy this one, another one coming very, very soon afterwards.